How you doing, everyone? Hi, John and Javi and Dominic and Big Sal. Good to see you guys. Oh, I have been super busy. Okay, what what I want to talk about today is sort of to look at some things that over the last couple years we've had the pandemic has led to so many things that are not good for watch collectors. Primarily the lack of supply because people have been locked down and so forth, and the accompanying low supply, high prices. We've really been hit by that, but I think at the same time it's sort of given us an opportunity to rethink, which I don't think as collectors we've really never had a lot to say about it. I think that I don't know what percent of the market we represent, but it's not a lot. But it's enough. I mean, it's like if a bunch of collectors decided, well, we're not going to buy watches from, Acme watches anymore, and because X, then this would certainly have some kind of effect. But overall, is that they're marketing to a certain audience, I guess, that is somewhere between, I guess, between about 3,000 and infinity as far as the price is concerned. But most people, I think, probably most collectors, I would say, are sort of under the $10,000 range for the most part. Okay, there may be some collectors who have a lot more money than that, and certainly watches that are more than that. But that, so anyway, I thought, well, now would be a good time to talk about, well, maybe there's another direction that the watch industry not so much take as a move, but really consider it the starting with the audience and saying, look, where's your market? And this is a market segment I think that we do represent as collectors, is that, and this isn't all collectors. Some collectors, they'll collect all kinds of weird stuff, myself included. But for the most part, I think there is a segment that they're not reaching because even though there are watches that are certainly worth having, we can't afford them or they're not available. Uh, the FP Journe was one that never was available exactly to everybody. uh Paddock Philippe was sort of, but it shot up and then they stuffed it up with silicon and some other things like that. But it's sort of like a a market for watch collectors or watch lovers, whatever, sort of a combination of both, who want a really good quality watch, but they can only afford so much. And so, what would be a direction for that? Mr. Gumby, how you doing? Hey, Clyde. uh, Hi from God's country, Manchester by the Sea, Massachusetts. Hey, Junior. Hey, how you doing, Brian? Good to see you. Okay, so this is yeah. It's funny, Dominic. A lot of collectors have the same problem. They, there's things they like to collect. One time I collected coins and baseball cards and I guess everything. I couldn't afford to collect airplanes. What we tried to collect were airplane avionics, and that was, you only do so many of those before your panel fills up. But anyway, going back to sort of like, oh, what are the alternatives now? Where you have mass-produced watches, the problem with mass production isn't exactly the mass production, but it's what they see as producible. Let me give you an example. The best example is Rolex. Rolex makes really good watches, and they make about, oh, I don't know, I think about 1.5 million a year, something like that. They make a lot more than most people realize, and they charge a lot of money for them. And but even they are sort of creeping up out of collectors' range, and a lot of collectors aren't, don't see them as sort of anything other than good tool horology. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with that. But other ones is starting to see some. We can sort of find some that every now and then something we can afford, but it, it has to be something. That's one thing I wanted to talk about. Um, what do we want really? I mean, like, I I suppose all of us get tired of exactly the same thing all the time, and things that we would like say, okay, now we're sort of moving to another level, but then we get to that level and we can't afford it. Okay, so that's sort of like what I'm looking at now. For the watchmaker, they got to stay in business. All right. As soon as they start slipping, they get gobbled up by Richemont and Swatch. Um, or more recently by Carrier and Lannon. But so what are the options that we have? Um, hey Maynard, how you doing? Koji, good to see you. John, hi John. Um, so I suppose, where we look at the options, they're either really expensive for some really good watches, excellent watches, or they're pretty common. All right. So where do we come up with that? We go to a watch manufacturer and say, look, this is what we'd like to have. Can you do it for this price point? So that's what I wanted to open it up to. I'm looking over here where I got my list of things that we're going to talk about. You have, first of all, there's unique but complicated watches. A lot of people figure the better, more complications you add to a watch, the better it is, and to some extent that's true. I mean, it's just more difficult to do. But on the other hand, there are certain modules that you simply stack on top of. In other words, ready-made modules. And I'll probably say this wrong. Dupuis de Praz for a chronographer, chronograph, or some other kinds of other functions like uh, an extra time zone, but they're not unique. Okay, half the chronographs you pick up are probably a 7750, or maybe a few of them will be El Primeros, and you have something sort of along those lines, but they're not very unique. I mean, I was looking at one the other day by Gearbell for sale, $750,000. They don't even think about that. That was in my lottery winning list. But I think if I won a lottery, I'd be I'd be hesitant even at, for something that expensive. So the other hand is that I'm thinking another option would be simple watches with masterful watchmaking, uh, like Dufour's Simplicity. I mean, here you have a watch that's worth hundreds of thousands of dollars if you can get one, and they're hard to get. Or something like Roger Smith. His things are the same ways. Now, there is one watchmaker who has simple watches that are really excellent, that not that many people buy. They're priced for, well, not that many people, enough people, but not that many. And that's Harboring 2. When you look at Harboring 2, they've got all of these wonderful features to them in the most simple sense. And yet they're excellent. I mean, they don't have, I suppose, the right amount of pizzazz or whatever people want. But the balance here is something that is valuable to the watchmakers, whether they're Swiss or German or Japanese or Chinese or anything. The here on the one hand, then on the other hand, you have this market, and the market is gotta be there, because if there's no market, there's not going to be any supplier. Okay, so let's hear some ideas that you have. I've got tons of them. I don't know if any of them are any good. A simple watch with a beautiful decorated movement would be nice. No date, no day. Yeah, those are. I was going to say I've been wearing one. This is like this one. The only thing it's got is a power reserve indicator. Um, for a lot of us, I think the only valid option right now is to wait and see. You're right, Clyde. That's a good point. We do have to wait and see. But while we're waiting to see, I think we can start looking at some things that say, this would be nice. What if? How would we go about doing it, or how could we go to a watch company and say, look, Acme, if you do this and this and this, we got a bunch of guys that we know will pay X amount for this level of quality, and that can be difficult. Hey, John Chan from Singapore. How are things in Singapore? Um, yeah, there's something about a simple watch with what I would always be looking for, some feature of constant force. Um, Having said that, there are a lot of other ones that I don't think we see, and I think part of it is in the watchmaking process itself. I'm thinking of Richard Harboring and the Harboring 2. Felix is, I've got a Felix. That thing is, it's almost boring. It's so good. All right. That's weird to say that. But that thing, I wind the thing up. It's always accurate. Its looks are sort of maybe Bauhaus plus one, about it. There are some interesting designs, but for the most part, but I've never met anybody who got a Harboring 2 who ever said, well, the thing doesn't keep time or doesn't do this. And they do have a few other things about them that are that are interesting. They do have the I want to keep calling it a doppelganger, but that's not the right name. Something it's a type of chronograph, I think, that Richard Harboring first made for IWC, and then he's using it with some of his other watches. I forgot the double something. The simplicity would be my pick. Very big. Yep, I agree with that. Um, I still think the Piaget Polo SS is the best value secondhand. Tim, I agree with that one too. I really like the Polo SS. That's more like that, I think. I don't like the one with the chronograph added to it, but otherwise, the Polo, yes, simple Polo and steel, super nice watch. I think another master watchmaker making simple, affordable watches with beautiful movements is Dornbooth and Son. Yeah, they're sort of an interesting uh, set of watchmakers. I think a lot of people see their watches as a little too close to what they started with, which was they started with a number, and this goes back to the reunification of Germany back in guess what is it, early 90s, something like that. Been a while now. Um, and they do make really good watches, but I think the emphasis that Dornbooth and well, no, that's not true either. They come out with a new watch that I really like, Brian. Yeah, that's a good example. What was it called? They did something with a watch that was really impressive. Um, my problem with Dornbooth and Son, I go way back with them when they were just starting to make their own movement. And but now, and I think one of the things to me that's distracting about them is all of this wonderful engraving, because a lot of time when I see a lot of engraving, you look at the movement and it's not, it's an ETA 6498 or something like that. But they have come out with something that is really top drawer kind of horology. The other thing too, what I like to do is go to Marco Lang and say, Marco, could you make us just a really simple watch, and a bunch of us would buy it from you? And I think we would. I've got, because his just like a master watchmaker. Um, and he makes the whole watch. Would you mind? I think I'll do that. Right now he's got a watch, what is it, 70,000 euro, something like that, for his Zeiter something, the double-sided watch, that wonderful watch that he made. But I'd like to see him work out some way that he could put a simple watch together and then get a bunch of people to help him assemble it. That would, I mean, the assembly would be basically taking, creating the iBosch and then putting it into the different ones. That would be a wonderful watch to have. Well, I have one, but I mean that's a new one by him. Something else too, and this may sound very, very strange, but uh, if I ever got a chance to meet Daniela Dufour, I would like to talk to her with Daddy out of the room, saying, "Look, because all of the stuff that she does." There was a story I read about her, and she was explaining how she went to watchmaker school, and then she went to work with her dad, and her dad told her they teach you everything wrong in watchmaker school. What they did in watchmaker school that was interesting was that they taught students how to make watches that can then be put, I think, on the assembly line. What Dufour was emphasizing was how to make these super high quality watches. And so what I'd like to do is go to Daniela and say, hey, how about this? We got a bunch of guys, we're good guys. Would you make a simple watch for us and we'll buy X amount from you? Or just make a simple movement, we'll take care of the rest. That would be a cool thing to have. Would be a one by her, which is really one of the few watchmakers that are an extension of a great watchmaker, just like the Wiederrecht brothers. They're an extension of a great watchmaker. We don't find a lot of those. F.P. Jorn's son, I think, became a pilot or something like that. He just wasn't interested in it. I can understand that. So, okay, let me shut up a second and let's see some more ideas you guys have. Does Harboring offer anglage to their plane? John, I don't think so. It's a good question. They do have a very pedestrian, plebeian type of finishing on their watches. I've I I sort of have I like a little finishing on some things, and on some, sort of the ideal was what Marco Lang did with the Georg. How he has those things you can look up and see the entire wheel train just right there, and it goes right into the escapement, and it's just like, wow, there's a whole watch you can see. Um, Not too far from that is the UWD 33.1. Now he did that, and they have those little bell-shaped finger bridges and things like that. Now that I really like a lot. And so with and looking at the Frederick II that I've got, with a trigonal bridge that opens up everything. You can see everything that's going on. To me, that's really neat. Now, he did a lot of other stuff to it, but I like Simon Glass. I mean, when you look at this is another reason I mentioned Daniela Dufour. Um, say, maybe if you're somebody, you can get some of your friends and show them how you do that nice finishing that your dad has. Some starving student or something. Um, 2 words, Urban Jurgensen. By the way, too, that's another thing. We got next year. They're coming out again. Hi, Tuna. How you doing? Um, Joas, how you doing, Joas? Is the Dornbluth Caliber 99.10 just renamed 6498? See, Clyde, that was what a lot of people thought or think about. Now, maybe that's true of the 99.1, but they did another one more recently. I'm going to have to look at it a lot more closely and see if they got going on that. See if you can put an advertisement seeking a watchmaker to do something special. Well, yeah, we that's we sort of done that. we, except what we did is that we went right to the watchmaker, and that's another thing. I think when you want something really unique that you can afford, you're going to have to do a lot of work. Okay. Now, let me explain that. We're just about ready to get a watch from a project that, most of you have heard of that we've done. And it's super extra special and everything. And on what is today? Saturday? Thursday, this coming Thursday, um, the Grand Prix competitive watches is going to be released, and our watches is part of that. Um, that's about there's that kind of project that we did is something that anybody can do, uh, and you can't. Sometimes a watchmaker says no. I can't do that, and this is why I emphasize it's got to be a profitable endeavor for them as well as it is for the people who want to watch. And one way to look at it is that here you've got, well, let's take a case maker, for example. All they do is make cases. There's one that shares a building with Vacheron Constantin in Geneva, a little suburb of Geneva. Forgot the name of the town. And they're owned by F.P. Journe. I forgot again the name. His big long French name. They, going to them and say, "Hey, we want to buy a case from you," and then go to a dial maker says, "We want to buy a dial for you," and do all of these things together, and then hire somebody to coordinate the whole thing on the design end. Hire a designer. It can be done, and I think that, and like I said, it's something anybody can do. You just have to coordinate things and and, and hope for the best. Um, the next UJS will probably have Voutier and Dials. Curious to see what he does. Neff, Voutier was involved in the early ones, in the original, the not the original, but the latest sort of group of them. He and Derek Pratt and I forgot the other guy's name, and they were all working together. And I think that Voutier, he was pretty young at the time. And what did he do? He did some aspect of making them. It is going to be interesting to see what he does. Right now, one of the identifying features of Urban Jurgensen is the observatory hands, where you got the round one and then you got the straight one. And whereas Voutilanen is more of traditional Breguet hands. I'm gonna see what that will be interesting to see what he does with that. Um, hey, Paul, there's some lovely watches other than the Laredo from Girard-Perregaux, affordable too. Yeah, Paul, Girard-Perregaux has always been an interesting one. They've always seemed to be, I don't know. I mean, like when you look at Girard-Perregaux, I'm trying to think, well, what would be something for constant force that they've done, something new and interesting. And that I think is usually where they're they have a sort of a good stable um, watchmaking features. In fact, the first Vacheron Constantin I had a Girard-Perregaux uh, fixed up movement in it. The overseas one had that. So yeah, they some other guys have gotten together and they've gone to a watchmaker, and I think one of them may have been Vacheron Constantin. And what they wanted something special. And so what they did is that they started with a standard, one of the standard models, and then they added to it. They said they put a new bezel or something like that, or a dial, sort of like the Domino's pizza on the Rolex. Uh, what I was thinking it was little more than that in the sense that you start from the movement on up. I suppose you could start with the dial or some other aspect of it, or the general shape and case. But to me, I like to start with with the movement because everything else has to fit around the movement. Okay, let's see some other great ideas. Um, okay, what do I think about the width watch diameter, Mike? Um, I guess all of us have a range. Mine goes from about that I like is from about 38 to 42. Uh, 39, 40 would be ideal. Let me tell you guys about something. I just saw it and I bought one. They're a little strap, special little strap with all of these gradations on it, and you take the strap and you put it around your wrist, and then it has a little it shows you what your wrist is. I've always wondered about that. I'll take a piece of string or something like that and try to measure it against millimeters and other kinds of things. But I ordered one of those from Isinger. I think they'd probably get a lot cheaper one from eBay or not eBay, but Amazon or something like that. Uh, but I thought, wow, what a neat thing. Got one of those. Um, yeah, Dominic. Yeah, Dominic. I got a feeling you're a lot smarter than I am about how to approach a sort of a deal like that. You sort of put it out for bids, if you will. That's probably a smarter way to do it in some respects. Um, it depends on. Here's one of the things I think that at least is big with me. It may not be that big with everyone. When I first started, trying to make my own watches, I got an inexpensive replica, not replica, but wasn't a knockoff or anything else. It was a Siegel version of the 6498, ETA 6498. And then there was a case that went with it, and there was a dial you could get, and then hands that went with the whole thing. In other words, you just buy them one at a time. Um, the and they're okay. I mean, you get these big fat cases, some other kinds of things you may not want exactly. Um, On the other hand, there's a very, very small number of people that you can go to. And I think that number, I'm hoping that number will be growing, that we could go to and say, hey, look, um, let's take, and I'm going to say this wrong, and I apologize. Let's go to Vianney Halter. He did a watch with somebody, but all he did was a dial. Same thing with Hajime Asoka. Some company did he did the dial design. They took care of everything else, and I think sold out in like 5 minutes. It was really at a good price. But here's one of the things that I think would be important is finding somebody really good who would be willing to do it. I mean, like you're buying the watchmaker, uh, and so everything that goes along with it. For example, Richard Harbring, man, I tell you, he's already got the watch that I would want him to build for me, and that's the Felix. That's exactly the watch, and he probably could price it better than I could get it for anyway. Here you have a time-only watch that keeps perfect time. God knows how he does it, but it's because of really good, fine watchmaking. To go to him and say, hey, we want a simple movement, was that, well, here, the A11 is available for, I don't even know if you'd want to do it. On the other hand, the UWD 33.1 and 33.2, those are like really nice movements that Marco Lang did. Now, that was when he was with Lang and Heim. So he can't exactly have one exactly like it, but he could certainly, if we ask him nicely, begged him, for example, maybe say, oh, yeah, sure, guys. Let's see what we can do. And I think, but here's the whole point. I think it'd be good for them, not just for us. And this is what I think it's important for us to keep in mind. Yikes, I ran out of time. Hi, Roar the Tiger and everybody else. Let me finish this up. Glatuti Original is massively underappreciated. I own a CQ Panorama Day. CQs I like too. I like that too. Hi, Johnny. Okay, frying pan time. Oh, you got the coffee, the hot cakes and everything. Okay. Hey, John Chan, how are you? Referring to Vianney Halter and Louis, that's the one yeah, you had a cheap price on it, but all you really got was the dial that was by Vianney Halter design. What I would like to see is going to him and saying, look, would could you could we get a simple movement, the most simple movement, take one of your old designs and just cut it down to nothing but the time only, okay, hours, minutes, and seconds, and we'd like to buy one of those, or we'd like to buy 100 of them, or something like that, pretty much like what Mojon has done with Chronode. So that's another thing we could do. Otherwise, the other options are we go with what they give us, and that's what I don't know. Okay, guys, listen. Homage was the word you were looking for. No, I know homage. Maybe that's it. Um, Lots of ideas out there. I've talked to a lot of people, and sort of on a one-to-one, and some really good ideas. So anyway, this afternoon I'm going to try to come up with some concrete examples that we might sort of talk about as models for doing some of this. Take care. I guess I had to back to wearing masks again, and the infection rate back up. So lucky us. Take care, everyone.